This is City Hall. City Hall of Boston, Massachusetts.
We're 5 years old.
This is Boston's City Hall that we're in right now. It's a gigantic building. I didn't realize it would be so huge, but here we are. Let's go in.
In the open air, I'm cold.
So we're going to see Sam Yoon right now. He is currently a counselor at large for the city of Boston, and he's going to run for the position of mayor. So I'm gonna interview him.
There's something to say. I'm here.
Let's play first. Hi. Okay, Sam. Thank you so much for giving your time today.
Pleasure.
Okay. So I'll just dive in.
Yeah.
Okay. Could you give a brief introduction about your personal history? Where were you born? Where did you move?
Sure.
Siblings, pets?
Well, I was born in Korea in 1970.
Okay.
So I came over to the United States when I was 10 months old. So I was just a baby. And I grew up in Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. Okay.
I have a younger brother, a younger sister.
Oh wow.
So I'm the oldest.
I'm the oldest too.
Okay.
I have two younger brothers though.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Okay. They look up to their nana.
Yeah.
Yeah. I came to Boston by way of New Jersey.
New Jersey.
Yeah, because I went to college at Princeton, and I taught in the schools in Trenton, New Jersey, and Elizabeth, New Jersey.
Okay.
And those were two pretty tough towns to teach in. And so when I came to Boston, I wanted to study education policy because I saw that in schools in certain parts of America, kids were not getting a good education.
Right.
And the whole reason why my family came to this country, why my parents came to this country, was for my education. So I really felt that there was something that we needed to do to provide equal opportunity for education for kids, in America. So came to Boston, and I studied at the Kennedy School, which is Harvard School for Government and Public Policy. And I then, for about 10 years, I worked on building affordable housing. Because
in Boston area?
Boston area.
Okay.
It's very expensive here. But I was building housing for people with mental illness who have low income, have not that much money, or for elderly, who are also low income. And but before I ran for office, I worked in Chinatown.
Okay.
And Chinatown in Boston is a very tough neighborhood because a lot of them are very new immigrants who need affordable housing, but it's very expensive, place to live.
Why is it so expensive?
It's because it's so close to downtown.
Oh, okay.
And downtown in Boston, where everything's so expensive, that means developers wanted to come in and build expensive luxury condominiums and apartments, and way out of the price range of the Chinese immigrants who live there. And so I was fighting for some land for about 3 years in Chinatown that actually was part of Chinatown 40 years ago. But the government took it away from Chinatown 40 years ago, and so we felt we had a claim to have that land come back and to build affordable housing.
How does the government just take away land like that, though?
The government, yeah, it's called eminent domain. It's a legal power where the government is able to say, if this land is better used for the public, then we can take it away from, from a family, from a business. But the government doesn't use that power that much anymore because, communities fight back. But Chinatown wasn't organized. It didn't have community organizations that had that much power.
Were they compensated at all for this, or?
They were, but very little. Very little. And when we researched how much these families and businesses got, we saw it was much less than their houses were really worth. So we had a big kind of fight for justice and for kind of fixing a part of Chinatown's history.
Okay.
And that's what made me realize how important politicians are, because we needed to get the help of politicians to help our fight in Chinatown. And so for the first time I realized, wow, there's real power. When a politician says, I will help, you know, a community, that means a lot to the community. And that's when I first began to think, well, what if I became a politician? And I looked around and I saw there were no Asian Americans who had become, you know, a state senator, a state representative, or a city councilor, or mayor. But not only that, no Asian Americans had even run for office.
Right,
they never even did a campaign for office in over 350 years of history in Boston. And so that's when I began to think that this is one way that I can really make a difference in Boston. So that's my history.
Okay. Great history. We probably jumped through multiple questions about the history there. But I don't know if this is pertinent, but why Boston? What made you stay here?
Well, I came to Boston for graduate school in 1993. And you know, one of the reasons that I stayed is because I met my wife.
Oh, nice,
she was also going to school. She was going to MIT and getting a PhD in biology.
Okay.
And so I dated her and, you know, got married. But I stayed in Boston. A lot of the reason is because it's a great city. And especially for the kind of work that I wanted to do, which was work with, you know, community-based organizations and nonprofits. Nonprofit organizations, it's very strong here in Boston. And so yeah, I stayed here because that's the kind of work that I wanted to do. And yeah, my wife and I like it here. So. As an Asian American, as a Korean American, you know, I didn't have very many Asian role models, you know, but I knew about the great kind of leaders in our, you know, history who made, you know, really important big changes, like Martin Luther King or Gandhi, you know, and I really admired the way they used their lives to kind of bring about change and to fight for justice and that kind of thing. But I think my life was shaped and my values were shaped, of course, by my parents, first of all, but also by my faith. You know, as a Christian, and seeing my parents' example, who were very strong Christians, you know, I had the sense that the kind of life that's a really good life to lead is a life where you serve others. Right. You know, so where you don't put yourself at the center of your life, you know, but you put others and ultimately God, you know, at the center of your life. So I think my values were kind of shaped around you know, that part of my faith, and that's a lot of the reason, you know, why I chose to live this kind of life, which is not very typical, you know, for a Korean. For a second generation, you know, Korean, this is not the most stable kind of career, and it's not the most financially rewarding. But my parents are very unusual, and they didn't really push me, you know, to go into that kind of life.
So they didn't pressure you to, you know, become a lawyer or a doctor or...
No.